This week on Game Dev, I get my wisdom teeth extracted, leading to a week of pain. And apparently progress. So let's get into it, shall we? Oh god, that was weird. Anyway, you may have noticed that some new things are showing up in the game now. I fully expected to make very little progress this week due to being in immense pain from the tooth extraction. But I ended up getting some very effective medication, so I was able to do much more work than I expected. The first step of getting my game to feel more like a game and less like a flying simulator was to add a health and experience system. I think we all know the most satisfying part of Vampire Survivors is picking up those little XP crystals and hearing the chime as the bar fills towards the next level. So after a few hours, I had the experience system working in the game with these collectible gems that you can see. For now, they are just generic blue gems, but I think in the future I will change them to something more befitting a sci-fi game. Now that I had the experience system in the game, I played it for a while to make sure I was happy with the level progression rates. Then I started to work on the Goliath task of creating new weapons for the game. Currently, I've created a total of 4 weapons, which I am calling Autocannon, Microwave Projector, Neural Dart Launcher, and the the G4RL1C array. Once I had each of the weapons working, I started thinking about ways to level up each weapon independently. In Vampire Survivors, each item has a fixed level up path. Maybe it increases the area, or the fire rate, or the damage. But in my game, I want each weapon to have a variety of different attributes the player can modify to increase the gameplay variety. So I decided to work with polymorphism again and created a base mod class that each weapon can have a list of. Each weapon can have as many mods or as few mods as I want, and each mod can affect various different parts of the weapon. If you've never worked with polymorphism before, I highly suggest looking into it, as it can be a very powerful tool, especially when working with inheritance. Essentially, it allows me to create a base fruit class that I can then inherit from with banana, apple, melon, etc., and then have each of those inheritance classes have their own stats and functions, as well as some of the base functionality. Now, Unity does sort of support polymorphic serialization, but the native support is extremely lacking, so I went ahead and imported Odin Inspector into the project. If you've never used Odin and you're working with the Unity game engine, I cannot possibly overstate how useful it is. It makes tasks that would normally take hours only take a few seconds. Here is an example using the garlic arrays mods. You can see that even though this is a list, each item in the list has its own stats, and I can choose the type of mod each element in the list is. I didn't go over this in the last video, but the bullet system also uses polymorphism, so that each weapon fires bullets that have their own unique behavior. I plan to go over the bullet system a bit more in a future video, so for now, let's just stick to the base weapons. Let's start with the bread and butter autocannon. This weapon doesn't do anything extremely interesting, it's just a very standard rapid fire gun. The mods aren't populated just yet, so let's go ahead and populate the mod list. For this type of weapon, I think a damage mod, a speed mod, and a fire rate mod would be perfect. You'll notice that when I create the mods, it automatically populates the mods with some default values. For now, I'm just going to leave these as they seem okay in my opinion, but you can also leave a name for the mod, which will appear at the top of the mod card. For now, let's just name them the basic attributes that they affect. So for the bullet damage, we'll just call it damage. For the bullet speed, we'll call it projectile velocity. And for the fire rate, we'll just call that fire rate. The reason we use projectile velocity instead of bullet speed is it just sounds a little better. And that's all there is to it. And now just like that, I've populated this weapon with those 3 mods. So if I play around with this weapon, those 3 mods will show up in the mod pool. Next, let's look at the microwave projector. This weapon is very similar to the autocannon, but unlike the autocannon, it does far less damage and instead affects an entire area. Additionally, the projectile isn't destroyed when colliding with objects, and instead loses a small amount of lifetime and does continuous damage to objects within its radius. For this weapon, I think the appropriate mods will be lifespan, damage, and area. We could also use fire rate and speed, but I want this weapon to stand out against the autocannon, so using as many different mods as possible is the best choice. We're going to give each of these mods its own name. Let's start with the lifespan. For this one, I think the name Wavelength is appropriate, if I could spell it. For the damage mod, we'll use frequency. And for the area mod, we'll use amplitude. I chose these names because it fits the structure of a wave. The wavelength is how far the wave travels, the frequency is how often it changes, and the amplitude is the magnitude of it. With our two basic weapons out of the way, let's look at one of our more interesting weapons, the G4RL1C array. This weapon has a very interesting effect of projecting bullets around the player continuously that then orbit around the player. This changes the playstyle a fair bit as the player has to manage the threat of getting closer to enemies to deal damage while also avoiding running into them and taking damage. Since this weapon is so unique, I've already added a lot of mods. Each mod affects this weapon in a somewhat unique way, since the pathing of the bullets is so different. Fire rate is the rate that the bullets are replaced into the orbit of the player. The speed of the bullets controls how fast the bullet orbits, but also how much they expand outwards over their lifetime. Area affects how far away the bullets are initially spawned from the ship, and lifespan affects how many revolutions a bullet can make around the player before disappearing. Damage is the only mod here that works exactly the same, but all bullets will need the ability to scale in damage to compete with an increased threat. Finally, we have our last and currently most fleshed out weapon, the Neurodart Launcher. This weapon fires seeking projectiles, and while that may seem fairly basic, these bullets possess the all-powerful big brain. By that, of course, I mean that each projectile has intelligence, and at different intelligence thresholds, different behaviors become available. This is also the only weapon that currently has an evolution horn. I haven't programmed the unique mod needed for this weapon yet, so I'll have to add the mods at a later date. But for now, I can just say that the intelligence of this projectile has several effects on basically every aspect of the projectile itself, and as such, this weapon will likely only need a few mods, the primary of which being intelligence increase. And that brings a close to the progress that I made on work for the week. Pretty good if I don't say so myself, but obviously there's a lot more left to do, so I better get back to work. Before I go though, I'd like to take a moment to thank everyone who made it this far in the video. If you have any ideas for weapons or mods, let me know in the comments below, or join the Discord community. This is the best way for me to get feedback for this early stage of development. If you liked the video, please leave a like and subscribe for future updates. Thanks for watching, and if you're working on your own game, good luck!